Bobby Lee Claremont and the Criminal Element by Jeannie Mobley. May 29th, 1923. North Side Neighborhood, Chicago, Illinois, 10:25 a.m. The funeral was a somber affair, as I suppose all funerals are. It took place in a handsome Catholic church in the Irish neighborhood on the north side of the city. The simple pine box in which Jimmy's body had traveled was replaced by an elaborate casket of polished wood set with brass fittings. Lavish flower arrangements were piled on the coffin and displayed all around the altar. I went in the company of Sister Bridget. It hadn't been hard to convince her to take me. Nuns will get a fella into church any way they can. Afterward, however, she was eager to return to the house of the Good Shepherd. It was Nanette who saved me by inviting us to the wake. "I must be getting him back," the nun said from over my shoulder. "I can see to it that he gets safely back to the convent, sister," Nanette said. "It would mean the world to me to have you there, Bobby Lee. I know so few people here." Her eyes were troubled and my heart ached. Sister Bridget considered a moment. "I can wait for you here if you promise to come straight back from the wake, and no more than an hour," she said, giving me a stern look. My innocent looks and my good behavior since meeting her at the train station were paying off. I promised, not too worried about whether or not to keep the promise. I didn't know what opportunities could come to a fellow at a funeral, but if she lost me because she trusted me, I figured that was her own fault, not mine. The wake was at the O'Halloran family house, a few blocks from the church. I walked there at the back of the crowd and soon found myself in the company of Clovis Dupre and his orchestra. "I ain't never been to an Irish wake. How about you?" he asked. I shook my head. I'd never been to a wake at all. After Maman was buried, the sisters had gone back to their usual chores with no further fuss. "Well, they say there's plenty of music, and Nettie has asked the boys and me to bring our instruments, so I guess that means we're going," he said, holding up a trumpet case to show me. "Well, Clovis," said a man with a trombone case stepping up beside us, "this here's your last chance to win her back. If you don't try now, you'll never see her again. Is that the way you want it?" "They've got them a rich white Yankee family now. You know I can't offer them anything to compete with that," Clovis said. "It's a shame. A voice like hers could have been famous, what with phonographs getting so popular and the jazz craze in New York," said the trombone player. "Life on the road ain't what she wants, Dell, and I don't blame her," Clovis said. Then he let out a deep sigh. "I've seen her safely here. Now I'm going to get out of her life and let her live it as she sees fit." I looked up into his face. His eyes sagged under the weight of his regret. "Mr. Dupre, do you love her?" I said. He smiled a little. "Everybody loves Nanette LeBlanc, son. You should know that by now. Even you, and you only met her 2 days ago." "But I mean, you loved her even more than that, didn't you?" Clovis didn't answer, just focused his eyes far away up ahead. "He loves her with his whole heart and soul," Del the trombone player said. "He asked her to marry him, and she was considering it when she met Jimmy. It broke Clovis's heart, I can tell you." "Now, Del, we don't need to go dredging all that back up," Clovis said. "The boys and me, we think Clovis ought to fight to get her back. We're touring the country, and we'd be mighty pleased to have the ladies singing with us again. The band ain't been the same without her, and old Clovis here, he can only sing the blues these days." "So, it wasn't a coincidence that you were on the train with him after all," I said. I knew it couldn't be. Clovis shook his head. "None of us rightly knew what she'd encounter here in Chicago. If Jimmy's family didn't accept her and she didn't get her insurance payment, I didn't want her to be all alone. She's got everything she wanted, a nice white family to raise her nice white baby boy." We walked the rest of the way in silence. Clovis with his trumpet and me with the disturbing feeling that despite all my schemes, I'd managed to get it all wrong. Inside the O'Halloran mansion, I quickly became separated from Clovis and Dell as I was ushered into the front parlor. More large sprays of flowers crowded the room, their sweet odor making the warm air oppressive. The chairs and sofas were all occupied by women and a few children, looking stiff and uncomfortable in their starched Sunday best. In the corner, a gaggle of cooing ladies hovered over little Jimmy Jr. and his lace-covered bassinet. Old Mrs. O'Halloran was being congratulated by friends on how beautiful and healthy the baby was, as if he were her child and not her grandchild. They were also offering their condolences to the old lady. Nanette sat in a stiff-backed chair a few feet away, but no one congratulated or consoled her. It was as if she were an invisible island in the crowded parlor. She wasn't invisible to me. I went directly to her and sat down beside her. She gave me a grateful smile. "I'm glad you came. I didn't have a chance to thank you properly back at this train station." I shrugged, feeling embarrassed. It was nothing. A mischievous twinkle lit her eye, and for a moment I almost saw the girl she had been before the world had smothered her with grief. "Getting nuns to lie for you? Hardly seems like nothing. In fact, you may be the best con artist of any of us pulling that off." I shrugged again, embarrassed and flattered that she'd noticed. "Clovis Dupre really gave me the idea. He told me how the laws in the South about colored folk don't apply up here in the North, so I figured there was at least a chance that they could marry white folks up there." "They can't," she said, and a flash of anger passed over her face. "But up here, an octoroon is considered white. In Louisiana, 1 drop of Negro blood makes a person a Negro." We paused in our conversation as a small group of women moved past us to get closer to the baby, who had now been lifted out of the bassinet and was being displayed proudly by one of Jimmy's sisters. "Do you like your new family here, Mrs. O'Halloran?" I asked. She gave me a thin, brittle smile. "They took to Jimmy Jr. right away. They were already discussing nannies and schools and a job in the family business. He will be very well taken care of here, I think." "What about you?" I asked. "Don't worry about me. I will have a roof over my head." I frowned, looking at the stiff way the women turned their backs on us where we sat in the corner. "They don't seem like a very nice family. Do you think they know about your secret?" Mrs. O'Halloran had been planning for Jimmy to marry higher up on the social scale. A banker's daughter, perhaps. But I have his son, so they will allow me to stay for his sake. I looked again at Jimmy's mother and sisters on the sofa. Above them, a framed cross-stitched picture hung on the wall. The words, "Home is where the heart is," filled the center of the frame, all wreathed with fussy little doves and flowers and silk thread. I thought of how unfussy and warm things had felt when I was with Terence and Leon on the train. What it felt like they had welcomed me into their family. I turned back to Nanette and gripped her hand. "Clovis Dupre would still take care of you, you know. He loves you. You could marry him and you'd have a family in the orchestra." She shook her head. "Clovis can't offer my baby the same kinds of opportunities he'll have with the O'Hallorans. But he can offer love and family, the kind of family that hugs and laughs and feels warm and safe, no matter how many fleas are in your bed," I said. "The kind of family my mother was." She looked at me then, her eyes so big and full I nearly choked on the tears, but I continued. "My mother would never work jobs that kept her away from me, even when they would keep her warm and fed. I always thought I was ruining her life, but now I think she made the right choice. With me, she smiled and laughed. We had love between us. She didn't do that just for me, but for herself, too. She needed that love. Everybody does." "Oh, Bobby Lee," Nanette said, her voice quavering. Tears were streaming down her cheeks under the veil. I had meant to comfort her, and instead I had made her cry. I mumbled an apology and made my awkward escape. As usual, I'd done the wrong thing. Maybe I just wasn't cut out for being good. In the grand foyer by the front door I paused to consider. I had escaped the nuns, at least for the moment. This was my best chance to slip off into the city, to get a new start. But if I was going to do that, I needed money. I turned in the direction the men had gone. I walked down a hall with flowered wallpaper until I came to the right door. I could feel the jazz music vibrating the doorknob. I stepped through into a haze of tobacco smoke and noise. Clovis and his boys were playing while a group of Irish fiddlers looked on. I suppose they were taking turns. Beer, whiskey, and conversation were flowing. In the corner, a uniformed cop was raising a glass with Kelly and several other men, which brought my blood near to boiling. Still, I had come for one thing and one thing only. I spotted Alphonse Bougeot and Malcolm across the room near the band, and I made directly for them. Well, Bobby Lee, how are you liking Chicago? Bugeaud asked, as if we were both just tourists who had encountered each other in the park. I like it fine, sir, but I'd enjoy it more if I had some money. Bugeaud threw his head back and laughed, as if I had just said the funniest thing in the world. Did you hear that, Malcolm? He'd enjoy it more if he had money. Ain't that the way of the world, kid? Malcolm smiled a little, as if his job required him to, then settled back into his usual expressionless silence. I did not laugh or smile. I'd like to collect what's owed me, I said. $180. Look, kid, don't you know it's bad manners to talk business at a funeral? I did what you asked, and I took a beating for it. I almost got killed by Kelly, and I told Hayworth exactly what you wanted. In fact, I even got the nuns to confirm the marriage, so Kelly can get his money and won't come after you. You owe me. You promised. Bugeaud glanced around for some other activity to distract him. I'd love to take care of that now, but the thing is, kid, there was a horse running yesterday at the track, a real sure thing. I narrowed my eyes at him. If it was a sure thing, then you should have even more money. You'll have to wait until Nanette gets her settlement, same as everyone else. Now, if you'll excuse me. And with that, he pushed through the crowd away from me. Malcolm followed, but as he stepped past me, he paused. Sorry, son, but you're never going to see that money. You should have demanded more up front, or just stayed out of it. Then he walked away in Bugeaud's wake. He was right, of course. What a sap I'd been. I turned to go, only to run smack dab into Brian Kelly. I jumped back in alarm, but Kelly had his hands up to show he meant no harm. Relax, kid. It's your lucky day, he said with a predatory smile. This is my boss, Mr. Dean O'Banion, and he wants to meet you. He runs the flower shop that did all the funerals for the funeral. Ain't they nice, Bobby Lee? I swallowed hard and agreed they were, though the words came out in an unintelligible squeak. Mr. O'Banion smiled and offered a hand to shake. He had a soft, round face and green eyes that crinkled pleasantly at the corners. A pleasure to meet you, Bobby, he said in a lilting Irish accent. You're a florist? I said as I took his hand. His grip was firm, almost painful. I have a way with flowers. He put an arm around my shoulder and started walking me toward the corner by the door, where they had been when I first came in. Mr. Kelly here has been telling me of his trip from New Orleans. He tells me you're looking for opportunities. Says you're green and brash, but you got tenacity and style. Even pulled nuns and coppers into your racket, I understand. What would you say to a job, kid? This was exactly what I'd hoped for when I left New Orleans. In fact, it was more. I figured I'd have to start small and work my way up. But here I was being offered a job by one of Chicago's top gangsters. And he thought I had style. There could be no better way to the top than being taken under the wing of the leader of the North Side Gang. Opportunity was knocking, and all I had to do was open the door. But somehow all I could hear was Sister Bridget asking that question. Is this the person you want to be, Bobby Lee? And this time I knew the answer. I stepped back, gently removing O'Banion's arm from my shoulder. Thank you, sir, but I'm not sure I'll be staying in Chicago. Thinking of setting up on your own somewhere, kid? Think you can do better than Dean O'Banion? Kelly growled. No, sir, I said. I'm thinking of going straight. I don't think I'm cut out for a life of crime. Kelly laughed. Likely story. You're an operator, kid. Anybody can see that. You don't got it in you to go straight. I shook my head. Brian Kelly had no idea what I had in me. Sure, he'd seen the lying and the sneaking and maybe even the stealing I'd done. But I had more than that in me, a lot more. And it was better than he knew, better even than I had known. Maybe you don't understand what I'm offering, kid, O'Banion said. This can be a tough town for a kid like who's got no one. I'm offering you more than just a job, you understand? I can take you under my wing, be like a father to you. Ain't that right, Kelly? Sure, boss, Kelly said, just like a real family. O'Banion turned back to me. Come by Schofield's flower shop tomorrow, and you can give me your answer then. Better yet, how about I send one of the boys round to collect you? You're at the Good Shepherd, I hear. There's really no need, I said. Anything for a good Catholic boy. I'll send someone by right around noon. I really have to go now, I said. Let me walk you to the door, Brian Kelly said. I tried to slip away into the crowd, but once again a firm arm clamped down over my shoulder. Side by side, Kelly and I moved through the sea of men, which parted for us as if Kelly were Moses, a murdering, thieving gangster Moses. Maybe you don't understand the fine opportunity that's being offered here, kid, he said. The exceptional honor Mr. O'Banion is doing you is to start out working directly for the boss, not working your way up through the dirtier side of the business. What I don't understand, Mr. Kelly, is what you and Mr. O'Banion are doing at the funeral of a man you killed. Putting on a show of sympathy for his family. You should be ashamed. I knew my words were dangerous, but my restraint had snapped when Kelly had put his arm on my shoulder. I was tired of other people thinking I was theirs to lead around like a lost lamb. Kelly gave me a scandalized look. Of course we're here. It would be a terrible insult for us not to pay our respects to a family that we have so long worked with. Poor Jimmy was one of our own, as was his father before him. But you killed him! Kelly gave a deep sigh as if bracing himself to explain the obvious to a simpleton. Jimmy's own carelessness killed him. Look at it this way. Say we're carpenters building houses, and Jimmy had fallen off the roof. Would you expect us who worked with him not to pay our respects just because he died on the job? I glared at him. Depends on whether or not you had loosened the shingles and given him a push. Kelly gave a little laugh. You got a tongue that will get you killed, kid. We've all got a weakness that'll be our undoing. For Jimmy, it was taking on bad partners. It's a crying shame. And what about you, Mr. Kelly? What is your weakness? I asked, looking at him through narrow eyes. What's going to get you killed? 'Cause I reckon what goes around comes around. He gave me a cold smile, but I could see the specter of fear in his eyes, too. The knowledge that maybe, just maybe, I was right, and that one day he'd be getting a push instead of giving it. I shook his arm from my shoulder and hightailed it down the hall and out of the house. Once outside, I paused on the front steps. The city of Chicago stretched out before me. A fresh start. I could go wherever I wanted. I walked down the steps, turned left at the sidewalk, and made my way the few blocks to the church, just as I had promised. Together, Sister Bridget and I caught a streetcar back to the house of the Good Shepherd. I was surprisingly content, except for one thing. I turned to Sister Bridget. Dean O'Banion said he was going to send someone after me at the house of the Good Shepherd. He asked me to work for him, but I said no. I hope I haven't brought danger to y'all. I'd leave if it would be safer for you. Nonsense, the sister said. Dean O'Banion wouldn't dare defile a house of God with his violence. If he does, he'll have more than just God to contend with. I didn't like the idea of bringing gangsters to the orphanage, but before I could protest any further, we found ourselves back at the house of the Good Shepherd, with the good sister ushering me inside and through to her office. There she opened the door and stepped back to let me go in first. I admit, it should have made me suspicious, but I hadn't known nuns could be con artists too. Not until the door closed behind me and I saw I was alone inside, facing Sister Mary Magdalene herself all the way from New Orleans. And from the look on her face, I suspected she'd left all of her charitable mercy behind.